Hey everybody, I'm John Stinson. I am the owner here at TRCOA, and tonight our guest speaker is legendary Tim Palmer. Yeah, we can go ahead. Without further ado, Tim Palmer, come on with it.
Well, I shouldn't start by doing anything more than congratulating all the graduates. I mean, that's what we're here for, really, isn't it? So, I'm super excited for you all. I'm jealous of all the adventures and the possibilities that are up ahead for you all. I wish I was your age again, I must admit. Mark Twain said, finding a job that you enjoy doing and you'll never work a day of your life. And I think that I've achieved that, and I hope that you do too. You've all got this degree now, so you're ready to play and you've got the dice in your hands. So it really, as John said, it really is now about stepping it up and getting out there. And I have faith in you all, so go for it. So my name is Tim Palmer. I'm a producer, I'm a mixer, I'm an advocate for music. I've served 2 terms as trustee for the Recording Academy, representing Texas. And I was born in New Braunfels, Texas. No, I was born in Newcastle, England. Close. And I'm very proud to have been making music now for 5 decades. And I've managed to have a top 10 album in every decade. So that's one of... I am super grateful to this industry, and I've been very blessed to work with a lot of my heroes from my youth. From David Bowie to Robert Plant, from Ozzy to U2. And in fact, I was nominated for a Grammy for my work with U2. So that was a very special time as well. I mixed the debut album from the band Pearl Jam called 10. And that was recently inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. And it's even become a a diamond RIAA status album, which is very rarely seen these days because no one buys music anymore, as we know. But the music industry's changed dramatically since I started. Of course, as we all know, music is free now, and water, for some reason, has become about $3 a bottle. But I'm not here by any means to paint a bleak picture. There are so many avenues that have opened up for you all now. And if you think of all the content that's being created for all the new streaming channels and for all the new podcasts and all the new internet programs, and on top of all that, they reckon, 60,000 new songs on Spotify every day. And guess what? All those songs are going to need mixing, producing, arranging, and writing. So this is a good time. It really is. And, don't let anyone tell you any different. There's a lot of work out there. It's about connecting with the artists now and use your social media as best you can. John said at the beginning that I'm a record producer, and I'll be honest, I was designed for that side of the glass rather than this side. So I find public speaking to be challenging, but I enjoy it, and I hope that in some way my career will inspire others to follow on in my footsteps. Now, these days, I work from a studio in my home, which is near Bee Cave. I've always seen my role in music as helping artists realize their vision. A lot of producers, it becomes about them. For me, as a producer or a mixer, it was about helping the artists get to the point that they want to be. And to get to that point, there's more than one path. So if you get stuck too much in your own ego and say it has to be this way, you're going to come unstuck. You need to be flexible. You need to work with the artists to make the special music that is needed. I feel that the traditional roles of producing and mixing has got a little bit more blurred these days. We're melding these roles together all the time. I came up with this term called predixing, which is my word these days, because a lot of music that's sent to me has been recorded in a home studio or in a small studio with maybe someone that hasn't got that much experience, with maybe a producer that hasn't been doing it so long. And they need more than mixing. They need me to give them as much input as I can from my career in production. So I call it predixing because you're doing a lot more than just balancing what they've done. If you did, quite frankly, it would be a bit of a disaster. So with the modern technology that we have with Pro Tools and all the plugins and all the samples and all the fact that you can have all your guitars, you can really help an artist realize their vision later. And I'm able to receive a song and say to an artist, look, I've changed the arrangement slightly, I've shortened the intro, I've doubled the part that you had that was at the end, and I've made it into a feature, I've fixed up a bit of the groove here and there, I've added a new guitar part here and there, and really not just mixing it, but really elevating the music. And I don't think you should be afraid of doing that. At the end of the day, the last thing that they can do is say to you, I would rather have it without that particular part or that particular part. And you can say, okay, that's fine, take it out. Leave your ego at the door and just get on with it and offer everything that you can creatively to help the music be the best that it can be. Let me show you some of where my studio is and stuff. So this is me. This was from a photo shoot recently for Solid State Logic because I'm using their faders these days. So they came to my house. And you can see my studio. It's a hybrid system. I control most things from the box in Pro Tools, but I also, I don't know if you can see it on this next photo, but I also have, yes, on the side here, you can see that there's analog channels. So it's a real hybrid because I don't stay, I'm not mixing inside the computer. I've sort of got a bit of the old and a bit of the new. And I guess that's because of my age, but I feel a lot more comfortable working with analog equipment and digital equipment rather than just mixing in the box. The speakers at the back that I'm mixing on, I've been working on for over 30 years. They're the same ones. A good investment, I'd say. I'm playing my guitar because, as I said, mixing nowadays is a lot more than just mixing, and sometimes you need to be able to add something, and I'm very happy to do that. I started in a studio when I was about 18 in London, in a studio called Utopia Studios. And back then, there wasn't these wonderful studios that John's created to help people and to learn. The way you learned was to sit in the back of the room and watch and listen. And there's good and bad to that, of course. I think the advantage that you guys have that I don't is that you're more aware of a lot of the way things actually truly work and about the structure of the sound. So that can be very useful to you later. Whereas for me, it was always just about how do I make this work and fiddling around till you got it to be the way you want. And you know, it's worked for me, but I would love to have some of the knowledge that you guys had that wasn't available to me. The thing that was available to me was to be in a studio, as I said, and working and watching bands making their music. And, you know, I started in the 80s, so I would have bands coming in like Dead or Alive, and Sting would come in, and Kajagoogoo, and Duran Duran, and Spandau Ballet. And I was able to be sitting at the back and go and get them their lunch and go and get them their tea and watch how they made records. And not only did you watch the way that they made it and you were inspired by things they did, but you also learned, I won't do that, because that was a disaster. So you learn good and bad. You watched the way a producer would deal with an artist. Sometimes I'd watch a producer try and coax a performance out of an artist and think, wow, that really didn't work for you, did it, mate? Yeah, you know, you have to think about a nicer way of putting what you're trying to say to bring it out. Because we're all human beings and we get upset, and, you know, some producers were very heavy-handed. But, you know, an example of somebody that came into the studio that I used to assist for was a guy called Rod Temperton. And I don't know how many people are aware of Rod Temperton, but he was an English writer from the Midlands who was in a band called Heatwave in the 70s. And he became a hugely prolific writer. He wrote songs like Off the Wall for Michael Jackson. He wrote Thriller. He wrote State of Independence for Donna Summer. He has a massive career and one of the most important writers in that field of music. And to be able to watch him work and arrange vocals, it's priceless, right? I mean, it was I was a very lucky guy to be working in a studio like that. Part of the time, as it were, was that unlike nowadays where everybody has a studio at home or knows someone who has a studio, back then there were very few studios. So if you managed to get a job in one of them and you were able to run that studio, you had a pretty good shot of getting to work with artists, which is different now. There's a lot more competition, I can't deny that. But I was able to move up to an assistant and then move up to being an engineer slowly. And what was great was studios were known, whether it's a Motown studio or a London studio like Air Studios or a Los Angeles studio like A&M, they were known for the sound of those rooms. And they were known for the quality of the engineers. So if you managed to be an engineer at one of those studios, people would just come in and they haven't even met you, they would work with you. So that was pretty special, and that's also something that is very rare these days. So Utopia Studios was a pretty respected studio. Some of the Pink Floyd engineers had worked there. John Maxwell had worked there, who'd recorded songs in the 60s with bands like the Dave Clark Five. So there was history, there was the new engineers, and I was the latest in the young kids on the block. So the way it worked in those days was you'd look in the bookings book and see if you managed to get on a session. And one day, in about 1986, when I was probably about 21, something like that, a band called Cutting Crew booked in. And I'd never heard of the band, and I didn't know anything about them. And I said, am I assisting on that session, or am I the engineer? They said, no, you're engineering it. And I said, what are they doing? They said, they want to mix some songs. And I said, okay, great, that's great. So they came in, I put the multi-tracks up, and we said, well, let's start mixing this song. So this was the song we mixed. Okay, so I'm hoping that with each of the things I play, I'm going to tell you something that I learned, okay? And the most important thing I learned from that is that the song is king, right? I mean, that song has stayed around for so many years, and the fact that I was connected to it was so valuable. It really, don't fool yourself that by, working on music that isn't special, if you make great sounding crap music, it's not going to do you any favors. Always try and align yourself with greatness in the form of the song itself or of an artist itself, because that's where it's going to really boost your career. I mean, it really helped me. I mean, that was I think it was even a #1 song in America. And instantly you become a better mixer because the song's great. I have this quote, which is sort of, I don't know how I feel about it, but I do believe that the best cure for a bad mix is a great song. And it's true. You can be working on a great piece of music, and within that piece of music, if it's a great recording and a great performance, you as a mixer have so much flexibility of what you can do, because people fall in love with the song, really. So even if you had the guitars quite loud, people would be like, I love that song, I love the guitars loud. And if you didn't have the guitars loud and you featured the drums, then I love the drums loud in that song, because it's the song, right? Yeah. And I've made that mistake so many times when I'm mixing an album project. I'll be mixing a song here and a song there, and then I'll get on one and I'll think, wow, I'm killing this song. I've done such a great job of this song. I'm listen to it, and then I think, no, that's the best song on the record. It's not your mix. You're enjoying it so much because it's the best song on the record. And that really is key, you know. That's what I'm saying. What I learned from that early on was you have to align yourself with great music and always try to, you know, if you see an artist and you think, oh, okay, I can record with them, and you see another one and maybe you'd have to work for free, it's better to work for free on an artist that's making something that's really special than it is to take the money, especially in the early part of your career. Okay, so this next song is another song which you might hopefully have heard. Is that guitar pick? Oh. Oops, there we go. So, how many of you have heard that song before? You know, that record was such an important album for me. It was 1990, I think, and I'd worked with the band that Pearl Jam were before. They were in a band called Mother Love Bone, and unfortunately, their vocalist, Andrew Wood, died of a heroin overdose just as the album came out. So the band split up and nothing came of that album, which was actually a very special record. So when they formed their new band, they reached out with some songs for me and said, you know, would you be interested in mixing this record? And I heard it and I thought, wow, this is great. But I certainly...
Sorry. Can you mute the A room? Sorry.
I certainly had no idea that the record would go on to, you know, sell however many million albums that it did. To me, what I heard in that was a really unusual vocalist in Eddie Vedder and a very passionate vocalist, and I thought the songs were pretty cool. But I didn't think that it was the sort of record that was going to blow up. I thought it would probably do well on alternative. But they asked me if I would mix it, and I said sure, and I actually brought them over to London to mix it, which shows a different time in the music industry, because the label were prepared to fly the whole band over to London, and I mixed the album in the Surrey countryside. So, you know, it's funny because people talk about the Seattle sound, but I like to think of it as the Surrey country sound. But the album was recorded in London Bridge in Seattle, and it was mixed at a studio, as I said, called Ridge Farm, which was actually, it was a 16th century farmhouse in Surrey that had been converted, and it was so great. I mean, it was the classic studio that the record companies in the 70s and 80s would send their bands out to, because you could control the bands because they were in one spot. They all ate dinner together. Everyone was, you couldn't leave, and there was nowhere to go to. There were fields of sheep everywhere. So that was the concept in those days. But I just loved it there, and I just got such a great feeling. And I could drive to it from my house, work with the band, do a mix, check it in the morning, and then drive home. And it was very special. But what happened with that song, and I hope that you were aware of that, but what was interesting about that particular song and what I wanted to learn and show you from that song was that sometimes necessity is the mother of all invention when you're mixing a song. And at the beginning of that song, there's a guitar that starts off, and I listened to it and I thought it sounded awful. And I said, look, I think that guitar sounds horrible. And I don't know whether they were happy that I said that. But I said, look, I really don't like that guitar sound, and I just want to try something. So I thought, how am I going to get the front of this song to work? So I thought, I know, well, it's a horrible guitar sound. I'll make it sound like it's coming out of a radio speaker, which is, not the first time it's been done, but it's a cool thing. So the guitar sounds like it's literally coming out of a radio. And then I pushed the vocal on top and thought, well, that sounds stupid, so I'll have to make that sound like it's coming out of the radio as well. So that went in, and once I'd balanced that up, then the bass guitar came in, and of course the bass had all the full frequencies, and when the bass slid in and the drums came in, it was a glorious moment. And I thought, wow, that really is a great way to set this song up. And that's how it was born. It was born out of not coming in and immediately thinking, I know what I want to do with this. It was like, what the hell am I going to do with this intro? Because it really, to me, is a bit of a letdown. And the end result was something special. And that's the thing to learn from that, is that don't be afraid. Let necessity be the mother of invention. If there's something strange, try something, go with it. There's no reason not to. The worst that can happen is that they say, hey, we don't like it, put it back. And as long as your ego's in check, you'll be fine. But always go down that road. I think it's so important to do that. I wonder if I can go back and play that intro again. There you go. Look, now here's the intro. You'll hear it, yeah. See, this is the... Yeah, it sets it up nice.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, so this is a whole different thing now. So Ozzy comes into the scene, right? 2002, I'm asked to make a record with Ozzy Osbourne, and part of the reason I think I was asked was maybe the record company knew that I was from England and Ozzy's from England, so we shared a lot of the same sensibilities of humour and reference points and stuff like that. I mean, he's older than me, Ozzy, but you know what I mean. We immediately hit it off in that, and he'd had a bad experience making his previous album, and this is what we were talking about earlier. If you handle an artist wrong, you can ruin everything. And this producer had said, "You're doing it wrong, Ozzy. You got to do that. You got to do this," and he just said, "I don't really want to make another record again." So Sharon and the record label said, "Look, come on, you can help me get Ozzy back in the studio." So there was a lot of drives to his house in Beverly Hills and playing songs. And this was the first album that he was making where he wanted to use writers outside of his traditional band. So there were songs coming in. Mike McCready had written one, the guy from Offspring had written one, the guy from Alice in Chains had written one, and I was sort of listening to songs all the time, and Ozzy and I were going through these songs, and there were some good ones. And one of the lessons that from this project that I want to bring to the table is, as a frustrated musician, which I think a lot of producers and mixers are, I didn't really feel that confident in my musicianship or writing. But I thought, when I listened to the songs, I thought, I think I could come up with a song for this album. And I'll show you, actually, because there's a guitar here. But basically, I sat in the kitchen, and I just had a simple, one note. that was basically the riff I came up with. And I thought, that could be sort of Sabbathy. So I fiddled around with it and came up with a few chords. And I had a Pro Tools set up in my bedroom. So I recorded a rough demo. And I said to my manager, I said, I'm going to go and play Ozzy this idea I've got for a song. He says, you're an idiot, don't do it. He said, you're gonna, he won't even want you to produce the record. You're not a writer. And I said, well, I know I'm not a writer, but I said, I think it's pretty cool. I think it could be really Sabbathy and dark. And he said, well, it's up to you. I wouldn't do it if I were you. I would just produce the record and just do your thing. That's what you're known for. You're not a writer. But I thought, I'll do it anyway. So I went round and I played it, and Ozzy liked it, and we worked on it. And this is the song. So. The nice thing about that was that after all the album was finished, the record label picked that as the single, which was cool. And it made #2 on the rock charts in America. And then they spent, which is another example of the decadence of the old industry, yeah. They spent $600,000 making the video for that song. And the video was shot in a hotel, and the hotel was collapsing, and Ozzy's running around, and the floors were falling in. And then 9/11 happened. Ooh. So that was never seen. It was not. Right? It was not appropriate, really. Yeah. I mean, you can see it on YouTube, but it was not playlisted anywhere, and it went away, which was a shame. But yeah, crazy times. But yeah, that was. I think the other thing that I wanted to mention about working with Ozzy is that, for me, the thing that is special about Ozzy is not that he's technically a good singer. It's that he has a voice, and he has a sound, and you recognize his voice as soon as he sings. You know it's Ozzy straight away, right? And that is more important than being able to do all the find vocalists that are recognizable, that have something special and some special quality about them. And I think that will really help you. I was fortunate to work with a lot of singers with unique voices, another one being David Bowie, of course. But I think it's very important to consider that having a voice is more important than just merely the technical ability. Mm-hmm. Okay, what we got next here? Okay. So this next... I'll play it first. I'll stop it there because I want to tell you a little bit about the setup to that song. So this is a lesson about not losing faith as well, because there are times in your career it's going to go like this. And during the 90s, it started to get a bit quiet, and I was thinking, oh, not sure. It's starting to worry me. I'm not getting as much work as I should be or hope to have. And my manager calls up one day and he says, hey, there's a Michael Hutchence album, and that was made just before he died. And my manager said, oh, there's some songs on it. Do you want to do some mixing? And I was, yeah, of course, I'd love to. I love Michael Hutchence, I love In Excess. So I started to mix a couple of songs for this album that was going to be put out after Michael had died. And one of the songs, fortunately for me, had Bono on it. And he'd done a duet with Michael. And the song came out great. And I actually had a phone call from Bono. He said, hey, you've saved this song. You'll be hearing from me if you're interested. And of course, I'm definitely interested. Thank you very much. So I was then given the opportunity to work on the song I just played you, which was a song called The Ground Beneath Our Feet. What was interesting about that was I had never really worked with U2 before, and as you can imagine, I was sort of freaking out a bit. And I didn't really know how it all worked. And I mixed it in London, and they were in Dublin. And I was driving into the studio, and my cell phone went off, and it was Bono, and he's like, hey Tim, it's Bono. He actually isn't Liam Neeson, that's my Liam Neeson version of Bono. Hey, it's Bono, we got the tapes in your family. No, he said, hey, it's Bono, we really don't like the drums on the song. And I thought, what is he talking about? We don't really like the way the drums are on the song. And I tried to pretend that I was fully aware. I said, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I thought, well, what does he mean? And I thought, well, I'm not even in the studio. So I get to the studio, I open up the files, and I figured that there was some electronic drums that he felt uncomfortable with. Later in the song, Larry comes in and it's all good. But at the front, it was very programmed. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, so I'm going to change the way the EQ is, take them out. What am I going to do? And I just thought, okay, well, I really think that it would be nice if it had a completely different groove, more like a Walk on the Wild Side, Lou Reed type feel, with brushes and some cymbals, and then use that as the basic groove, and then cut back into the electronic drums when they needed it, just for back and forth. But I thought, well, I don't know how that's going to fly. They could be like, what the fuck is this guy doing with that song? How dare he, right? And Larry might have been like, why does this guy think he's going to play drums on U2, right? So I thought, what am I going to do? I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do it. I'll just try it. I'll give it a go. So I rented a snare drum, and I rented some cymbals, and I made a loop and put some bits and bobs on and cut between. And it took a long time to get the mix right, but I sent it to them, and they loved it. And I thought, oh my God. And the lesson there, of course, is you just got to follow your heart and follow your gut and do what you feel is right. I mean, you've got nothing to lose. I think if I'd just done something subtle with what they'd done, they probably would have been disappointed. But being brave enough to do that paid off, and after that, I was asked to work on the album. But let me go back to it so you can hear what I'm talking about. Oh no, I haven't messed it up, have I?
Yeah, I think and you click the play.
Oh, you got to go back. There we go. See, that's me, right? Wow. It's more stripped down, you know? And then the other drums come in here. These were the drums that were all the way through before these. pitch, it's different, right? That was all the way through before. But I just put it in there, and then I cut it again. So you get the idea there. That was the that was the challenge, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me, because then they asked me to work on that album, and I went to Dublin and I mixed Elevation and a song called Stuck in a Moment,
cool.
and a song called New York, and it was just an incredible experience for me, because apart from anything else, they'd made an album called Pop previously that had not been well received, and this in a way was. It was like, to the fans, it was a return to form, that album. Yeah. And in true U2 form, I was having dinner every night. They had it was ironic, they had a round table, right? Nights of the Round Table. So we were all sitting around this round table every evening and talking about what was going on in the studio. And there was Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois and Steve Lillywhite and Jimmy Iovine and the band and me, and it was like, for me, all these producer legends, it was quite an incredible experience to be part of the making of that record. And the other lesson to learn with that project was about being patient, because by God are they slow. I mean, they're notoriously famous for being slow, but U2 don't have a financial problem, so they will do a mix, and then let's get this guy to mix it, and let's take that bit from that one, and then get that guy to mix it again, and then they listen to it and they say, now we've had it mixed, I think we can play it better. So they go back and they play it again. And I remember having dinner one night, and I'd spent 2 weeks mixing a song, and I was at dinner and I could hear the sound coming out of the live room downstairs, and I said to Sam, who was their manager, road manager, and I said, "Is that?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "What's happening?" He goes, "They want to cut it again." And it was like, well, everything I've done for the last 2 weeks is just complete. So you learned to be patient, and I think I think the fact that they work so hard at crafting what they do is an amazing thing, really. I mean, obviously they have the financial ability to do that, but they weren't prepared to just take the first thing that comes along. They're always trying to better things, and everything had to be approved by everyone, which was exhausting. But I could do a mix sometimes, and 3 of the band would come down at the end of the night, and they would literally applaud, and then the following morning Larry would come in and go, "I'm not sure," and then it wouldn't be done. So you have to be patient, and I think that's something that we could all learn in this industry.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we got here now? So that was that Tears for Fears song was from their latest album that came out, I think it was this year actually, 2022. And for me, it was great because it was a big hit in the UK, and that was part of my fifth decade of songs I'd worked on, so that was nice. But I started working with Tears for Fears in about '93. Roland, the main writer, had fallen out with Kurt, and they made a couple of albums without Kurt, and I was brought in to produce Tears for Fears, and I made a couple of albums with them, and I've had a very long relationship with the band, and I'm a big fan of their music, and I'm actually going to go and see them play in London on Monday, which I'm super excited to see, because I missed the show in Dallas. But what I wanted you to take away from that is that I think sometimes when we listen to music, we think that when we're actually listening to the final project, we sort of assume in our heads, A, that it was everything that the artist wanted and it was just the way they wanted it, which is not often the case at all. And secondly, that it was all high fives and everyone was really happy, which, as far as the production and the mixing, which is not true either. And I'll tell you for why. In this particular case, that song, I was asked to do some mixing on this most recent album. And of course, having such a long-standing relationship with the band, I was totally up for it. And I'm very close to Roland, so I said, look, you guys, I can't deal with all of you, I'll just deal directly with Roland. And sadly, Roland's wife at the time was going through a very tough time, and she sadly died about 3/4 of the way through the record. And we'd been friends for many years. So dealing with Roland was obviously quite tough because he had a lot on his plate anyway, because he was having to go to see his wife in hospital and stuff like that. And we were working on that song, and I was sending mixes back and forth. And the other guys in the band and the A&R people gave me nothing. They gave me no input. And I was saying to Roland, I don't know, what is it they're looking for? Unless they can actually put pen to paper or call me, how the hell am I supposed to change things and improve it? And he said, I don't know, mate, it's just, everything's just going weird. And so I did a few more mixes, and finally I got a phone call from the record company, and they said, we're just going to stop now. And I was, what do you mean you're just going to stop? You haven't even attempted to tell me how I can improve anything that you're not happy with. But they said, no, we're not happy with it, and we're going to stop. So, of course, I was feeling pretty upset about it, and I liked what I'd done, and I felt it was good, but they were moving on. So time moves on, and they carried on working on their album, and I get a phone call from Roland, and he said, oh, we're going to use the mix. And I said, what do you mean you're going to use the mix? He said, oh, everyone's really happy with it. And I thought, that's weird. And I said, well, you've got to pay me. You realise that? Because they hadn't even paid me at that point.
No.
So I said, you've got to pay me. And he said, sure, yeah, we'll get that together. So they paid me, and it became the single, and it was the first track on the album. So my point being that even when things are going wrong, you have to stick with what you believe and follow it through. And, maybe people will, when they get a distance from it, will appreciate what you're doing. It's certainly, and in fact, out of the 3 songs I mixed, 2 of them were released in the end. But at the time, I literally was feeling very dejected and thought, wow. And you start to question yourself a little bit. But in the end, it all worked out fine. But there are times like that. And I think as, graduates, you ought to be, prepared for the fact that it's not all smooth sailing. And you have to, be tough about it and just move on. Okay, so this record was a record that I worked on with David Bowie when he formed this band Tin Machine. In around the late 80s, David had been making a lot of very polished 80s pop-sounding records. And after Let's Dance, which was a huge hit, he made a couple of other albums that weren't so well received, and people felt that he'd become part of the mainstream, and he himself wasn't comfortable in that role. He didn't see himself as being Mr. Pop Star and, on all the smash hits covers and stuff like that. He was a very credible artist, and he wanted to do something again that stimulated his creativity. So basically, he smashed it all down, and he was making these perfectly polished records, and he decided to form a band called Tin Machine, which was sort of upsetting to the people at the record company because they would like to have had another Let's Dance. And instead of Let's Dance III, they got World War I or whatever. Because Tin Machine was really a rough and ready sounding record. But what it did do was it excited David again and rekindled his love of music, and he went on to have his career stepped up from this. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me to work with David, because I was literally dropped in there, and it was like the expression "flying by the seat of your pants" was exactly what it was. I mean, there were musicians in a room, unrehearsed, and they were just going for it. And it was incredible, and it was incredible for me. It was stressful, I can't deny, but it was wonderful. This first record we started in Switzerland, and then we went to Compass Point in Nassau, which is wonderful, and then we mixed in New York City. Some funny things I remember, like in Compass Point, when we got into the studio, the studio owner said, I said, can we get some more mic stands? I just need a few more mic stands. And he said, they have them in Studio B. And I said, well, can we get some more? And he said, well, we'll have to bring them in. They take a couple of weeks. And I said, but the band they want to record now. And he said, I'm sorry about that. So I hung string from the ceiling, and I hung microphones on string above the drum kit and things like that. And it got very creative in Compass Point, but it was really a lot of fun. My manager said, look, David Bowie's going to call you. Of course, for me, he was my hero musically as a child, or as a teenager, I should say. So the idea that David Bowie was going to call me at home was pretty shocking. So I pick it up, and he's like, hello, Tim, it's David Bowie here. And I'm like, hi. And so I chat with him, and he asked me what my favorite records were and of his, and he said, I told him that I loved The Lodger, and I loved Scary Monsters, and all those sort of more dangerous records. And he said, well, I think you'll really enjoy what we're trying to do here, and would you be interested in coming to record with us? Duh. So I said, okay, great. And he said, we're thinking of starting on, and he told me a date. And the date that we were starting was literally branded into my head. So when the tickets arrived, I just put the tickets on the mantelpiece and just moved on, because I knew I was starting on this day, so I knew the tickets were this. There's mistake number one, and this is what you have to learn here, is to always look at your itinerary clearly.
At your tickets.
So here I am about to work with my hero, and I'm sitting at home the day before feeling very stressed out about the whole thing, and listening to old Bowie records thinking, I don't even know how I can compete with these records and record this guy. And I'm sitting there, and the phone rings, and it's the owner of the studio in Switzerland, a French guy, and he's like, Monsieur Palmer, why are you not here? I said, what are you talking about? He said, your flight, I went to pick you up at the airport, you were not on the plane. And I ran and I looked at my ticket, and they'd moved everything forward. And I hadn't bothered to check, because I was so excited and freaked out about this date that I didn't double check my ticket. So then I had to call David. I had to call David Bowie up and say, look, sorry about that. I didn't get on the plane. And he was actually absolutely fine about it. He lived very close to the studio, and he was very understanding. But I really thought I'd blown it. I mean, what a way to start, a session with your hero, is to not even bother turning up on the first day, right? But it was amazing. And some of the things I took away from working with David was that we tend to feel that everything that we record has to be perfect and it has to be a certain way. He was so much more about letting things breathe, letting things have the humanity, allowing musicians to maybe do something that he hadn't even considered himself. He would let people, because a lot of the musicians would at first be like, is this okay? And he's like, just do what you think is right. He allowed people to express themselves in his music. And that's why his career and his albums are so varied, is because he brought together groups of people that he respected and let them do what they felt was right. And he even did that with the producers and the engineers. And as a co-producer and as an engineer, the first time I set a microphone up for him, I thought he's going to say, I use this and I need my cans to be like this. But he was none of that. He was just a true artist. He's like, that's fine, yeah, if you're happy, I'm good, let's go. And that's the way he was. He was not interested in that side. And I have so much respect for that, He was just, I remember watching him do a vocal. on a very sad song, an Indonesian island called Amlapura. And there was a song about this particular island, and he sung the vocal, and I was like, wow, that's great. So stop, yeah, all done. And he came in and had a listen. He said, I think I want to do it again. And I said, why? I said, it's great. What is it you're thinking? And he said, I think it could be sadder. And I said, okay. And I said, I know I shouldn't be asking this, but how in your head are you going to make it sadder? He said, I'm just going to sing the vocal just a little flat. And I was like, okay. And he went out and he did the whole vocal just bordering on the edge of being flat, and it gave it this melancholy sadness that I've never seen anyone repeat to this day. I mean, he had that much control of his voice, but it was so natural, It was so incredible, and I was so fortunate to spend time with David Bowie. I mean, he was. People say that he changed his personality all the time, and I do know that during that period we were close, and when we stopped working together, I didn't really hear from him again. But I cherished the times I spent with him, and it was even. I remember one time when I was in London, he calls me up and says, "Hey, do you know anywhere I can get a really cool leather jacket?" And I thought, why would David Bowie be asking me that? And I said to him, well, I do actually. There's a great place on the King's Road called Johnson's. And actually, this is where I got this shirt from. And I said, they do really cool rock and roll clothes. Let's go down there. And he said, I'll pick you up. And he turns up in a black limo, sort of stretch type car. And I jumped in the back. And I went shopping with David Bowie in London. And I'll never forget that. And it was pretty special. Anyway, so overall thoughts. Producing is literally about getting from point A to B and doing whatever it takes to make it right. There's not a right or wrong way of doing it. If something is a little bit distorted but it's cool, that's what you use. If somebody's sung something on a demo and they try and sing it again with a better sound, if the demo's got more feeling, don't take the better sounding one, take the demo. That's the one that's got the vibe, right? Yeah, I did a record for a band called Texas, funnily enough, in the UK, who were quite a big band. And I did the whole single, and she tried to sing the vocal, and I thought, the vocal on the demo is the one. And the band agreed. So I said, let me just try, and this was before Pro Tools, let me just try and move it across. So it took me hours, but I got the vocal to line up to the new recording. The record company came down, and they're like, oh my God, the vocal's killer. And I felt like, okay, well, it's the one from the demo, but that's fine. But it was special. So, if it needs to be, take the vocal from the demo. I mean, you're looking to get the best performances, the best, that's more important than anything. Use whatever mic. Don't get fussy about microphones. I'm not. Sometimes I go in a studio and they'll mention a mic and I'm like, I don't even know which one that is. If you listen to it and it sounds good and you move it around, don't worry about what make it is or how much it costs. Just use the one that gets the part across the best. Look out for happy accidents. Don't let them slip away. Sometimes something happens and it's an accident, but it's actually the best thing that you're going to record all day. Always look out for those happy accidents and look for voices, not singers. I mean, they're really key. And as I said at the start, don't forget that we all bow down to the song. The song is king. And I wish you all the best, and congratulations on your graduations today. I didn't even play you a song off this. Here's a little bit of what we recorded on this album. Just a little bit, just to take it out. Big Casino, this was recorded in. faded out.
Awesome, Tim. Well,
Excellent.
thank you so much,
No problem.
guys. Appreciate it. Everybody hang around, socialize some more, have some food. I'm sure Tim will be around a
Cheers.
little bit longer.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.